Welcome to the HFY Tales channel. Remember to like and subscribe if you like the story. Enjoy and take care.
The marketplace was alive with colors, sounds, and the hum of a dozen alien dialects blending together in a melody both chaotic and beautiful. The warm air smelled of sweet, spiced fruits, mingled with a faint metallic tang from weapons vendors displaying their wares. Vendors of all kinds lined the broad, bustling street, hawking items from rare galactic spices to strange technological marvels that glimmered with a faint light. For human space explorer Darren Cole, it was all more than a little overwhelming. Darren wandered through the crowd, his senses on high alert, trying to blend in despite being one of the few humans here. The marketplace, set on a neutral trade planet that welcomed all species, was known across the galaxy as a hub of exchange and entertainment. Yet Darren wasn't here for the market's typical attractions. He was looking for a very specific alien, and she was far from ordinary. He spotted her from a distance, towering over the crowd and surrounded by her own magnetic aura. Zyra, a Garathian warrior, was unmistakable. Her deep, violet skin caught the sunlight as she moved, and her powerful build was adorned with intricate markings, etched lines that told stories of battles fought and victories won. Her presence alone made people part like a tide, giving her space wherever she walked. Darren had heard stories about the Garathians, known for their strength, pride, and unmatched beauty. Garathian women held a reputation that had captured the fascination of every species in the galaxy. Zyra was a legend even among her own kind, famous for her combat skills and equally celebrated for her radiant beauty and fiery personality. He felt a mixture of excitement and nerves as he approached her, determined to at least introduce himself. After all, how many humans could say they'd met a Garathian warrior, much less spoken to one? As he neared her, she turned and caught sight of him, her bright golden eyes narrowing with curiosity and a hint of amusement. Another human, her voice was low, rich, and carried an edge of playfulness. "What is it with your kind? Always so curious." Darren smiled, unfazed. "Curiosity is a strength," he replied, looking her directly in the eye. "And I heard you like a challenge." Her eyes gleamed with intrigue. "A challenge, is it?" She folded her arms, studying him as though weighing his worth. The crowd around them seemed to sense the tension, watching with hushed anticipation. "Think you can handle one, human?" she asked, tilting her head. Her gaze flicked over him, a clear evaluation of his physical form, and her mouth curved into a faint smirk. "Depends on the challenge," Darren said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. Zyra's presence was magnetic, her confidence both intimidating and enthralling. The onlookers leaned in, whispering in alien tongues, waiting to see if he would back down. She chuckled, the sound rich and inviting, but laced with a sharp edge. "Very well," she said, taking a step closer. "You've heard of Garathian warriors, but you think you could stand up to one?" Darren shrugged, trying to keep his voice steady. "I believe in testing my limits." Zyra's eyes gleamed. "So do I." She paused, allowing her challenge to settle, her confidence an unspoken reminder of her prowess. "Think you can handle these curves?" Her tone was teasing yet daring, her words laced with a deeper meaning that made him realize she wasn't just talking about her physique. The crowd murmured, a mixture of admiration and envy for his boldness. No one dared challenge a Garathian warrior without either sheer courage or utter foolishness. He took a deep breath, allowing the words to resonate between them. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't think I could," he replied, meeting her gaze with equal intensity. Zyra's smile widened. "Then let's see if you're as bold as you think." She gestured towards a clearing near the edge of the market, a small sparring area, where warriors displayed their skills and settled bets of strength and endurance. Darren felt his pulse quicken, but he kept his expression calm, determined. Here, in the heart of the alien marketplace, with the eyes of curious onlookers fixed on them, Darren knew he'd soon be testing his limits in a way he'd never imagined. The sparring arena was a simple, open space at the edge of the marketplace, surrounded by a low barrier and padded floor. Alien spectators filled the makeshift stands, eager to see a rare spectacle, a human challenging a Garathian warrior. Darren stood across from Zyra, feeling the weight of her gaze settle over him like a physical force. Her confidence was palpable, her stance both powerful and relaxed as if she'd done this 100 times. She tilted her head, examining him with an expression halfway between amusement and curiosity. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice carrying effortlessly over the low murmur of the crowd. "I don't hold back." "I wouldn't expect you to," Darren replied, his voice steady, though he could feel the anticipation building in his chest. He knew this wasn't just a challenge of strength. It was a test of endurance, resilience, and the unspoken boundary between human and alien. Zyra raised her arms, flexing in a way that showcased her physique. Her well-defined muscles, marked by intricate patterns and symbols, gleamed in the sunlight. The symbols, etched in silvery ink that glowed faintly, told tales of battles and victories in a language Darren couldn't read, but deeply respected. She was more than just a warrior. She was a living legend. "Let's start easy, human," she taunted. "You can quit whenever you've had enough." Her tone was playful but challenging, her golden eyes watching him with fierce amusement. He held his ground, fists at the ready, knowing this was more than just a physical test. It was a chance to earn respect from a race that valued strength and spirit above all. "Come at me, then," Darren replied, his voice calm, even though he could feel his heart pounding. Zyra smiled, and in an instant, she was on him. Her movements were fast, a blur of strength and agility, and he barely had time to block her initial strike. She was testing him, her attacks not fully committed but precise, as if gauging his reflexes. Darren countered, aiming to evade rather than overpower, his movements relying on speed rather than strength. Each move was like a dance, with Zyra leading and Darren following, matching her pace as best he could. The crowd around them cheered, some in awe of his resilience, others waiting for him to falter. Every step, every turn, felt like a new challenge, her powerful frame nearly overwhelming him, yet he refused to back down. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that," Zyra remarked, a hint of admiration in her voice. "More than you'd think," he replied, breathless but determined. The crowd gasped as Zyra launched a swift, spinning kick, one he managed to dodge by mere inches. He felt the force of her movements in the air, her power almost palpable. She watched him with a raised eyebrow, visibly impressed by his reflexes. "Most would have fallen by now," she said, a spark of respect in her gaze. "But you're still standing." Darren grinned, unable to hide his pride. "I've got a lot left in me." For a moment, something shifted in her gaze. Her smirk softened, replaced by a glint of respect. She paused, lowering her fist slightly, her stance becoming less guarded. "You know," Zyra said, her voice quieter, just for him to hear, "I expected another frail human, someone who'd be too scared to last through even one round." "Well, I'm not most humans," Darren replied, his voice steady, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that matched her own. They shared a brief, unspoken moment of understanding. Darren realized that for Zyra, this was as much a personal challenge as it was a display for the crowd. She wasn't just testing his endurance. She was evaluating his spirit, his worth as a potential equal. Without warning, Zyra surged forward faster and fiercer than before. Darren barely managed to brace himself as she closed the distance between them, her movements a perfect blend of power and grace. Her fists came down with practiced precision, her strength radiating through every strike. Darren felt the impact of each blow, but he didn't give in, using every ounce of his training to deflect and endure. Then, in a swift move, she caught his arm, pulling him close. Darren could feel her breath against his skin, her gaze intense and unwavering. "Touch them," she dared, her tone teasing but carrying an edge of sincerity. "Think you can handle this?" Darren, caught off guard, steadied himself. She was close, so close that he could see the tiny flecks of silver in her golden eyes. could feel the warmth radiating from her form. He hesitated, the boundary between challenge and attraction blurring in this moment. Taking a breath, he reached out, his hand resting on her arm where her muscle curved beneath the intricate markings. Zyra watched him, her gaze never wavering, the moment charged with both respect and curiosity. She seemed pleased, as if his touch was an acknowledgement not of attraction alone, but of her strength, her pride, and everything she represented. "I can handle it," he said softly, and for the first time, she truly smiled, not the playful smirk but something genuine. The crowd, unaware of the deeper connection between them, erupted into cheers and whistles. To them, it was a simple victory for Zyra, another human who couldn't withstand her power. But to Zyra and Darren, it was something else, an unspoken understanding, a bridge of mutual respect. The crowd gradually dispersed, leaving Darren and Zyra alone in the clearing. The excitement of the sparring match lingered in the air, but the quiet that followed allowed a new feeling to settle between them. Darren felt a rush of pride mingled with exhaustion. He'd held his own, even if only barely, against one of the galaxy's most formidable warriors. More importantly, he sensed that he had earned Zyra's respect. Zyra relaxed her stance, folding her arms as she gave him an appraising look. "You surprised me, human. Not many can keep up with a Garathian. Most flee at the first hint of a challenge." "Well," Darren replied, catching his breath, "humans can be tougher than they look." A rare, genuine smile touched her lips. "Perhaps there's more to your kind than I thought." She paused, studying him for a moment. "Come, let's talk somewhere less chaotic." She led him through the marketplace, toward a quieter spot on the outskirts, where a grove of tall, silver-leaf trees provided shade and privacy. They found a stone bench beneath the trees, and as they sat, the market's hum faded into the background. The air here was cooler, scented with the faint, sweet fragrance of the trees. Zyra leaned back, glancing at him. "So, what brings you to this part of the galaxy, Darren? It's not often we see humans out this far." Darren considered her question, knowing that his answer mattered. "Curiosity, mostly. I wanted to see what else is out here, beyond the limits of what I know. There's something about the unknown that draws me in." Her gaze softened slightly, as if she understood. "You're braver than most. I'd have thought humans would be cautious, sticking to their own space." "We can be cautious," he admitted, "but we also have a drive to explore. We may not be the strongest or the fastest species, but we don't give up easily." Zyra nodded thoughtfully, a hint of admiration flickering in her eyes. "That's something I can respect." She looked away, her gaze distant, as if recalling something from her past. "When I was young, I was told I wasn't strong enough to become a warrior. Garathians value strength above all else, and the elders didn't believe I had what it took." Darren raised his eyebrows, surprised. "But you proved them wrong." She nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I trained harder than anyone. Every scar, every mark," she gestured to the silver etchings on her skin, "is a testament to a battle I fought to earn my place. I carry them as proof of my worth." He reached out, tracing one of the intricate symbols along her forearm, feeling the faint ridges of the markings beneath his fingers. "Each one has a story, doesn't it?" She nodded, her gaze meeting his. "Yes, they tell of battles won, opponents overcome, and the strength it took to survive." Her voice softened as she added, "But they also tell of moments when I almost lost everything." A silence settled between them, filled with an unspoken understanding. Darren realized that beneath her fierce exterior, Zyra carried a history of struggle and resilience, a journey not unlike his own, though their worlds were vastly different. "Humans don't have traditions like that," Darren admitted. "We don't wear our battles on our skin, but we still have scars in our own way." She regarded him thoughtfully. "What scars do you carry, Darren?" He hesitated, her question catching him off guard. He hadn't expected to share something so personal with someone he'd only just met, but there was something about Zyra that made him feel safe, as if she'd understand in a way no one else could. "I lost my brother," he said quietly, looking down at his hands. We were explorers, just like me. We ventured out to a distant planet, eager to be the first humans to set foot there. But we didn't know what we were up against. There were creatures, dangerous ones. He paused, swallowing the knot in his throat. He didn't make it. Zyra's expression softened, and she reached out, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Her touch was warm, grounding, and he felt a strange sense of comfort from her presence. "Then you are braver than I thought," she said gently. "To continue exploring, even after such a loss, that takes a strength few possess." They sat in silence for a moment, sharing the weight of each other's stories. Darren realized that Zyra wasn't just a warrior. She was a kindred spirit, someone who understood the sacrifices that came with courage and the pain that came with resilience. Finally, she spoke, her tone lighter. "Tell me, Darren, do you think humans and Garathians are so different after all?" He met her gaze, his own eyes thoughtful. "No, not as much as I thought." A playful glint returned to her eyes. "In that case, perhaps you're worthy of joining me for the Garathian bonding ceremony. It's a rare honor, even for non-Garathians." Darren raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Bonding ceremony?" Zyra smiled, the mischievous spark returning to her expression. "It's a ritual of mutual respect. A rare few are invited to participate, and even fewer are given the opportunity to bond with a Garathian warrior. But I think you've earned it." He felt a thrill of excitement, mixed with a tinge of nervousness. "What does it involve?" She leaned closer, her voice a low murmur. "It involves trust, courage, and perhaps a little daring. Think you can handle it?" Darren's heart raced, but he held her gaze, unwavering. "I've come this far. I think I can handle a little more." Zyra smiled, her expression softening as she extended her hand to him. He took it, feeling the warmth of her skin, the strength in her grip. They rose together, ready to embark on the next step of their journey, a step that would bring them closer in ways neither of them could have anticipated. As they walked back into the marketplace, side by side, Darren realized that his journey had taken an unexpected turn. What had begun as curiosity had become something far more profound, a connection forged through mutual respect and shared strength. And as he looked over at Zyra, he couldn't help but wonder what the Garathian bonding ceremony would hold. The evening sky above the marketplace had deepened to a warm, dusky purple by the time Darren and Zyra reached the edge of the marketplace, where Garathian ceremonial grounds were set apart from the bustling stalls. The area was a quiet, sacred space, surrounded by towering stone pillars etched with Garathian symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. Darren took a deep breath, feeling both anticipation and curiosity. He was about to experience something rare, something few outsiders were ever invited to witness, let alone participate in. Zyra gestured for him to follow her to the center of the clearing, where a raised stone platform stood. She turned to face him, her expression more serious than he'd ever seen it. "This is a bonding ritual," she explained, her voice low, almost reverent. "It's a tradition among Garathian warriors, a ceremony of respect and mutual understanding. We do this only with those we deem worthy." He nodded, understanding the significance of her words. "What does it involve?" "It's a test of both physical and emotional endurance," she replied. "But more than that, it's about trust. You'll need to let go of any doubts and fears. This ritual requires complete openness." Darren swallowed, the gravity of the moment settling in. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. Zyra stepped closer, her golden eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. She raised her hands, palms open, and Darren mirrored her, pressing his hands to hers. The warmth of her touch was grounding, and he felt an unexpected wave of calm wash over him. "Close your eyes," she murmured. He obeyed, allowing himself to focus solely on her presence, the strength in her hands, the rhythmic sound of her breathing. Slowly, he felt the world around them fade away, leaving only the connection between them. Zyra's voice softened, taking on a meditative tone. "In this ritual, we share our strength, our pain, and our memories. It's a way to honor each other's journey, to acknowledge both the light and darkness within us. As she spoke, he felt a strange sensation, a warmth spreading from her hands into his, as though her energy was merging with his own. Images began to surface in his mind, fragments of memories that weren't his. He saw flashes of battlefields, moments of victory and loss, the weight of a warrior's life. He glimpsed Zyra's past through her own eyes, the intensity of her training, the sting of every bruise, the pride of every scar. He saw her as a young warrior, struggling to prove herself to her clan elders, enduring the pain of countless trials to earn the markings on her skin. He felt her emotions as though they were his own, the pride, the fear, the determination that had shaped her into the warrior she was today. When he opened his eyes, he found her watching him, her expression vulnerable in a way he hadn't seen before. For the first time, Darren felt he truly understood her, not just as a warrior, but as a person who had fought through immense adversity to claim her place in the world. "What did you see?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. He met her gaze, a new depth of understanding reflected in his own eyes. "I saw it, everything. Your journey, your strength. It's remarkable." She smiled, a hint of relief in her expression. "And now, it's your turn." Darren felt a wave of vulnerability, but he knew that to fully honor the ritual, he would need to share his own truth. He closed his eyes, allowing himself to remember the pain, the loss that had marked him. He recalled the moment he had lost his brother, the crushing guilt and sadness that had followed. He remembered the long, lonely nights aboard his ship, the lingering emptiness that no amount of exploration could fill. He had spent so much time running from his past, yet here, in this sacred space, he felt safe enough to let it all surface. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Zyra watching him, her gaze filled with empathy and understanding. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice filled with genuine compassion. "Loss like that, it changes you. It makes you stronger, but it leaves scars that never truly heal." He nodded, feeling a profound sense of comfort in her words. "I suppose that's why I keep moving, keep exploring. It's my way of finding purpose, of honoring his memory." They stood there in silence, the weight of their shared pain forming a bond between them, one that transcended words or gestures. Darren felt closer to Zyra than he'd ever felt to anyone, their souls intertwined in a way that defied the differences in their species or worlds. Finally, Zyra broke the silence, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "You've proven yourself worthy, Darren, not just of this ritual, but of my respect. You're stronger than I ever expected." He smiled, a warmth spreading through him at her words. "That means more than you know, Zyra." They lingered, hands still entwined, neither of them in any hurry to break the connection. The vulnerability between them had transformed into something else, a powerful, unspoken attraction that simmered beneath the surface. "Human," Zyra murmured, her tone soft but challenging. "Do you still think you can handle the challenge of a Garathia?" Darren chuckled, his voice tinged with both affection and confidence. "I think I can handle a little more than you're giving me credit for." Zyra's smile widened, her golden eyes shining with that familiar spark of playfulness. She stepped closer, her face mere inches from his, and he felt the heat radiating from her skin, the scent of her subtly intoxicating. "Then perhaps we should test that resilience of yours further," she teased, her voice a low murmur that sent a shiver down his spine. Darren's heart raced, but he held her gaze, feeling a thrill of excitement at her challenge. "Is that another dare?" She tilted her head, her smile turning into a full grin. "It just might be." For a moment, they were lost in each other, the world around them fading as they stood in that sacred space, bound by something greater than themselves. The connection between them was undeniable, a force that defied logic or reason, drawing them together in ways neither of them had anticipated. And as they moved closer, sharing a moment of vulnerability and mutual respect, Darren knew that his journey had led him to something he could never have imagined, a bond with a Garathian warrior that went far beyond mere friendship or attraction. It was a connection born of shared strength, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of two souls who had found solace in each other. The warmth of the bonding ceremony still lingered as Darren and Zyra walked side by side back toward the heart of the marketplace. The ritual had left them both feeling raw and connected in a way that words couldn't quite capture. Darren felt as though he could read Zyra's thoughts just by looking at her, as if a deep understanding had been carved between them, a silent language built from shared pain and respect. As they moved through the crowd, Darren noticed how other Garathians looked at Zyra with admiration, but also curiosity, as if they sensed something different in her presence tonight. He wondered how many others had been invited to share a bonding ceremony with a warrior of her standing, and how many had managed to forge a connection like this. Zyra glanced at him, a slight smile tugging at her lips. "You've proven to be full of surprises, Darren. I didn't expect a human to hold his own in the ritual, let alone leave an impression." Darren grinned. "Glad to know I didn't disappoint." Their playful exchange was laced with something deeper, a tension that had grown since their first encounter and had only intensified through the bonding ritual. It was a strange sensation for Darren, one that tugged at him with a quiet urgency. He'd felt attraction before, but never this magnetic pull, this undeniable need to be closer. They stopped at the edge of a small pavilion, where the sounds of the marketplace faded, leaving only the quiet murmurs of the night. Zyra turned to face him, her gaze intense, her golden eyes reflecting the faint light of the distant stars. "Tell me, Darren," she murmured, her voice softer than usual. "What do you think of Garathian ways?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I think your traditions are beautiful. Intense, maybe, but filled with meaning. I've never experienced anything quite like them." She seemed pleased by his answer, a hint of pride in her gaze. "We are warriors, but we also value strength of spirit, loyalty, and honesty. The bonding ritual isn't just a ceremony. It's a commitment to honor those qualities in each other." Darren nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I respect that. I think it's a commitment I'd want to uphold." Zyra's expression softened, and she took a step closer, the distance between them shrinking until he could feel her warmth, her presence enveloping him in a way that felt as powerful as the ceremony itself. "There is something else I need to tell you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The bond we share tonight, it's rare. Few Garathians ever form it with someone outside our clan, let alone another species." Darren's pulse quickened, the significance of her words settling over him. "What does it mean?" "It means you've earned a place among us," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "A place in my life." The intensity of her words left him breathless, and he felt his own walls crumbling in response. The connection they had forged was undeniable, a bond that went beyond any simple attraction or respect. It was something far more profound. Without thinking, he reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against her skin. She didn't pull away. Instead, her hand tightened around his, and for a moment they stood together, bound by a shared understanding and a desire that simmered just below the surface. "You know," Zyra murmured, her voice taking on a playful edge, "humans may be weaker in physical strength, but I've learned tonight that there is strength in you that rivals even the toughest Garathian." Darren chuckled softly. "I guess we all have our own ways of being strong." Their faces were close now, so close that he could feel her breath, warm and steady, as her gaze held his. The air between them crackled with tension, the boundaries of their connection blurring as the pull between them grew. "Human," she whispered, her tone soft but filled with challenge. "Do you truly believe you can handle the heart of a Garathian warrior?" His response was immediate, his voice steady. "I'd face any challenge if it meant staying close to you." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, followed by a smile that was both tender and fierce. She reached up, her hand resting against his cheek, her touch both strong and gentle. "Then show me, Darren," she murmured, her gaze unwavering. "Prove to me that this connection is more than just a ritual." He didn't need to be asked twice. Darren leaned in, closing the distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that held all the emotions they had shared: respect, vulnerability, and a passion that had been building since their first encounter. Zyra responded with equal intensity, her hands gripping his shoulders, pulling him closer as though she couldn't bear even an inch of separation. Their kiss deepened, a shared release of everything they had kept hidden, each of them surrendering to the moment without reservation. Darren felt the strength of her embrace, the way her hands moved with both possessiveness and tenderness, as though she had chosen him and would not let him go. As they parted, her gaze met his, a rare vulnerability shining in her eyes. This is not something I would give to just anyone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Darren nodded, understanding the depth of her words. "Nor would I." They stayed together in the quiet pavilion, lost in each other, sharing a moment that felt timeless. For once, Darren felt he was exactly where he was meant to be, beside Zyra, bound by a connection that defied words or logic. And as the night continued around them, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with her, united by a bond forged in courage, respect, and a love that had grown from the strength of their shared spirits. The following morning, the marketplace was alive with its usual bustle, but for Darren, everything felt different. The night he had shared with Zyra had left an indelible mark on him, a sense of belonging and purpose that went beyond his previous goals of exploration. Standing beside Zyra, he felt like a part of something larger, connected not just to her, but to the rich traditions and spirit of the Garathian people. Zyra walked beside him, her gaze forward and purposeful, but there was a new lightness in her step, a subtle softening in her demeanor. As they made their way through the market, Darren noticed the glances cast their way, curious, admiring, and occasionally disapproving. Garathians were proud, and seeing one of their own openly connected to an outsider was unusual. One figure stepped forward from the crowd, a Garathian elder with deep-set, calculating eyes and lines etched into his skin that denoted his status. His gaze fell on Darren with a mix of suspicion and disdain. "Zyra," the elder began, his voice a low rumble, "I see you have found yourself an unlikely companion." Zyra's expression remained calm, though her eyes hardened. "Elder Corax, this is Darren, a human who has proven himself in spirit and strength." Elder Corax's gaze lingered on Darren, his mouth pressed into a thin line. Strength, perhaps, but spirit? A human could never truly understand the heart of a Garathian. Darren met the elder's gaze, sensing the challenge in his words. "With respect, I understand more than you might think," he said, his voice steady. The elder scoffed, his gaze shifting back to Zyra. "Be cautious, Zyra. To bond with an outsider is to tread a path fraught with danger. You know our traditions, our values. A human does not share them." Zyra's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "I know our values well, Elder, and I know that strength is not bound by species. Darren has proven himself worthy of our respect." Corax's expression softened, though the disapproval remained. "Perhaps, but the path you walk now will not be easy, Zyra. Many will not accept this bond. Even among our own, there will be those who question your loyalty to the clan." As the elder stepped back into the crowd, Darren could feel the weight of his words settling over them. He turned to Zyra, a hint of concern in his eyes. "Are you sure about this? I don't want to make things difficult for you." Zyra placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "I am certain, Darren. The Garathian way is to honor strength, courage, and loyalty. I have chosen to honor those values, and I will not let the opinions of others sway me." They continued through the marketplace, the elder's words lingering in the back of Darren's mind. He couldn't deny the tension his presence brought, but he also felt a renewed determination. If he was to be with Zyra, he would face these challenges head-on. As they walked, Zyra led him toward a secluded area beyond the market stalls, where the cliffs overlooked the open landscape of the planet. The view was breathtaking, with vibrant, swirling colors stretching across the horizon. She looked out over the cliffs, her expression thoughtful. "Being with you, Darren, it's a choice I never expected to make, but it's one I would make again, no matter the consequences." Darren moved closer, his hand brushing hers. "I feel the same. Whatever comes our way, I'm here with you." They stood together in silence, the vastness of the landscape a reminder of the challenges and possibilities that lay ahead. Zyra turned to him, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. If we are to face these trials, we must do so with strength and unity, she said. Garathians do not back down, and neither should we. He nodded, feeling the intensity of her resolve. Then we faced them together. Their moment was interrupted by a sudden, urgent call. A young Garathian warrior approached, his expression serious as he bowed to Zyra. "Apologies, warrior Zyra," he said, casting a brief glance at Darren before continuing. "The council has summoned you. There are concerns regarding your recent actions." Zyra's expression hardened, but she nodded. "I understand. I will attend to the council immediately." Darren felt a pang of concern, but masked it with a reassuring smile. "I'll be here when you're done." She squeezed his hand briefly, a silent promise, before turning to follow the young warrior back to the council chambers. Darren watched her go, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had known that their bond would be met with resistance, but seeing it firsthand was sobering. As he waited, Darren wandered through the marketplace, trying to quell his unease. He knew that Zyra was strong, that she could handle whatever came her way, but he couldn't shake the feeling that her connection to him might put her at odds with her own people. After what felt like hours, Zyra returned, her expression unreadable. She walked to him without a word, leading him to a quieter corner of the market where they could speak privately. "The council was less than pleased," she admitted, her voice low. "They warned me of the consequences of forming a bond with an outsider, but I stood my ground." Darren felt a surge of admiration and gratitude. "You didn't have to do that." She looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, I did. I chose this path, Darren. I chose you, and I will not allow fear or tradition to dictate my choices." He reached for her hand, pulling her close. "Then we'll face whatever comes together. I won't let you bear this burden alone." They stood there, united in their resolve, aware of the challenges that lay ahead, but unwilling to let them stand in the way of their bond. Darren knew that the path they were walking was fraught with difficulty, but as long as he had Zyra by his side, he felt capable of facing whatever trials awaited them. And as they looked out over the marketplace, bound by love, respect, and a fierce loyalty to one another, they knew that their journey was only just beginning. The following days were tense. Darren felt the weight of every glance, every whispered conversation in the marketplace. It was clear that his presence had disrupted the Garathian community, especially among the elders and more traditional members of the clan. He was used to standing out as a human among aliens, but this felt different. This time, he wasn't just an outsider. He was a disruptor. Zyra, however, stood by him unwaveringly. She led him through the city with pride, her hand often resting on his shoulder, a silent declaration of her commitment to him. And while her confidence gave him strength, Darren could see the toll it was taking on her. One evening, as they sat together overlooking the cliffs, Zyra turned to him, her face shadowed with worry. "They've issued a formal challenge," she said quietly. "A trial of allegiance." Darren's heart sank. "What does that mean?" "It's a test," she explained, her voice filled with frustration. "An ordeal to prove my loyalty to the Garathian clan. I must demonstrate that my bond with you does not diminish my strength, my commitment to our people." He felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "That's unfair. You've already proven yourself 100 times over." Zyra's expression softened, a small smile curving her lips. "Perhaps, but the elders are bound to tradition. They believe I have compromised my loyalty by choosing to bond with an outsider." Darren reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Then I'll face it with you. Whatever they throw at us, we'll handle it together." She shook her head, her gaze intense. "No, this trial is mine alone. I must face it as a Garathian warrior. If you intervene, it will only prove their point, that I am too attached, too compromised." A bitter taste filled Darren's mouth, but he nodded, understanding her decision even though it pained him. "Then I'll be here," waiting for you. The next day, the trial was set to take place in a secluded arena reserved for Garathian rites of passage. The arena was a vast, circular space, bordered by stone walls inscribed with symbols of strength, loyalty, and resilience. Darren stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as the elders and other Garathian warriors took their places, all eyes focused on Zyra. Elder Korax stepped forward, his expression stern. "Warrior Zyra, you have chosen a path that defies our traditions. To prove your loyalty, you must complete this trial alone, as a true Garathian. Only then will you be allowed to retain your place among us." Zyra nodded, her face set with determination. She cast one brief glance in Darren's direction, and he felt the intensity of her resolve, her silent promise that she would return to him no matter what. The trial began with a series of physical challenges, tests of strength, speed, and agility designed to push her to her limits. She moved with a grace and power that left Darren in awe, her every motion a testament to her skill and dedication. Each time she completed a task, she glanced in his direction, as if drawing strength from his presence. But as the trial continued, the challenges grew harsher. The elders brought forth a sparring partner, an enormous Garathian warrior known for his ruthless efficiency in combat. Darren's fists clenched as he watched Zyra face her opponent, each blow echoing through the arena as they exchanged strikes with brutal precision. The crowd murmured, captivated by the intensity of the battle. Darren could see the strain beginning to wear on Zyra, her movements slower, her breaths labored, but she didn't back down. Every time her opponent struck, she rose again, her resolve unbreakable. Finally, with one last surge of strength, she brought her opponent to the ground, pinning him in a move that left the crowd in stunned silence. She stood, her chest heaving, and turned to face the elders. Elder Korax stepped forward, his face impassive. "You have proven your strength, Zyra, but there is one final task." Darren's heart raced, wondering what more they could possibly demand of her. "This is a test of loyalty," Korax continued, his voice cold. "To demonstrate that your bond with this human has not weakened your allegiance to our people, you must sever the connection here and now. Prove to us that your loyalty lies with your clan, above all else." A shocked silence fell over the arena. Darren's stomach dropped as he realized what they were asking. They wanted her to renounce him, to end their bond as a sign of her dedication to the Garathians. Zyra's face remained expressionless, but Darren could see the turmoil in her eyes. She looked at him, her gaze filled with pain, her silent question clear. He nodded slightly, his heart breaking, but he knew what he had to do. He stepped forward, his voice steady even as his chest ached. "Zyra, if this is what they require, then do it. I won't hold it against you. I would never ask you to choose between me and your people." She stared at him, her eyes filled with unspoken words, her fists clenched at her sides. For a moment, he thought she might go through with it, that she might renounce him to save her place among her clan. But then, slowly, she turned to face the elders, her voice ringing out with a fierce, unwavering strength. "I will not sever this bond. My loyalty to my clan remains, but I will not betray my heart to prove it." The crowd erupted in shocked gasps, and Darren felt a surge of pride and admiration. She had chosen him, even at the cost of her place among her people. Elder Korax's face twisted with anger. "You defy us, Zyra. You choose an outsider over your clan. Such betrayal cannot go unpunished." Zyra stood tall, her gaze unflinching. "I have chosen to honor both my clan and my heart. If that is considered betrayal, then so be it." Darren stepped forward, unable to remain silent any longer. "Zyra has shown more loyalty, strength, and courage than anyone here. If you cannot see that, then perhaps it's not she who is betraying her people, but you who are betraying her." The crowd fell silent, and for a moment, he wondered if he'd gone too far. But Zyra's hand reached for his, her grip firm and steady. Elder Korax looked between them, his expression a mix of anger and reluctant respect. Finally, he nodded. "If you're willing to face exile for your choice, then we will respect it. But know this, Zyra. You are no longer part of this clan." A murmur ran through the crowd, but Zyra's expression remained calm. She squeezed Darren's hand, her voice unwavering. "I accept." With that, she turned, leading Darren away from the arena, her steps strong and sure. The crowd parted, watching in a mixture of awe and disbelief as she walked away from the life she had known, choosing to stand by him despite the cost. As they reached the edge of the marketplace, Darren looked at her, his voice filled with emotion. "Zyra, you didn't have to do that. I would have understood." She met his gaze, her expression softening. "You are worth more to me than tradition. The Garathian way is to honor strength, and there is no strength greater than choosing one's own path." He pulled her close, his heart swelling with gratitude and love. "Then we'll walk this path together, no matter where it leads." The sky above was a mix of deep indigo and shimmering stardust as Darren and Zyra left the Garathian territory behind. The weight of the past few days seemed to press down on them. Yet with each step, Darren felt a growing sense of freedom, a strange exhilaration that came with breaking free from the expectations and judgments of others. They reached a small outpost on the edge of the Garathian settlement, a neutral zone where travelers of all species gathered before venturing out to distant planets. The area was quiet at this late hour, lit by the glow of distant stars and the hum of ships preparing for departure. Zyra looked around, her gaze lingering on the horizon. She took a deep breath, and Darren could see the tension melting away from her shoulders. Her expression was a mixture of relief and resolve. "Are you all right?" Darren asked gently, sensing the weight of the choice she had made. She nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips. "I am. Leaving the clan, it's strange, like shedding a part of myself. But I chose this path, and I do not regret it." Darren reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "You're not alone, Zyra. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." She turned to him, her gaze softening. "I know, and that's what gives me strength." She paused, her eyes reflecting the distant starlight. "But this isn't just a new path for me. It's a path for us." They shared a quiet moment, the weight of their journey pressing down on them, but it was softened by the warmth of their bond. For the first time, they were free from the constraints of tradition and judgment, free to explore a life built on their own choices and values. As they began planning their next steps, a soft voice interrupted them. "If you're looking for passage off-world, I might be able to help." Darren turned to see a human pilot standing nearby, his face friendly and open. He wore a worn jacket and a curious grin, and his small ship was docked nearby. "Name's Jax," he said, extending a hand. "I couldn't help but overhear. You two look like you could use a fresh start." Zyra raised an eyebrow, her warrior's instincts on high alert, but Darren shook Jax's hand. "We're looking for transport, yes. Anywhere away from here." Jax nodded. "Well, my ship's small, but it'll get you where you need to go. Besides, I have a feeling you two could use a bit of adventure, a little unknown territory, if you will." Darren exchanged a glance with Zyra, who gave a small nod. They boarded Jax's ship, and soon they were soaring away from Garathian space, the planet fading into a distant memory as the stars stretched out before them. As they traveled, Jax introduced them to the ship's modest quarters. It wasn't luxurious, but it was comfortable and provided a sense of security that Darren hadn't felt in a long time. He and Zyra spent hours talking, sharing dreams and plans for the future, forging a vision of the life they wanted to build together. During one quiet evening in the ship's common room, Zyra looked out at the stars, her expression thoughtful. "You know, Darren, I spent so much of my life fighting for acceptance among my people, for a place in the clan. And now, without those expectations, I feel like I'm finally able to be who I am." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're a warrior, Zyra. That hasn't changed. You've just chosen a different kind of battle, one that's all your own." She smiled, her gaze shifting to him. "And you're a part of that. You've shown me that strength isn't just about tradition or duty. It's about being true to myself, to us." Darren nodded, feeling a deep pride swell within him. Their journey had begun as an exploration, a curiosity about each other's worlds, but it had grown into something that neither of them could have anticipated. As the days passed, Jax revealed himself to be a surprisingly insightful and supportive companion, sharing stories of his own adventures and offering advice for navigating life on the fringes of civilization. They became a small but united crew, a family of sorts, bound by shared purpose and mutual respect. One evening, Jax joined them in the common room, a mischievous glint in his eye. "So, what's next for the two of you? Any grand plans?" Zyra glanced at Darren, her expression thoughtful. "We're not entirely sure yet. There's a whole galaxy out there, and for the first time, it feels like every path is open to us." Darren nodded, feeling the excitement of possibility building within him. "We'll find our way. Maybe settle somewhere quiet, or maybe explore. There's still so much we don't know." Jax grinned, "Spoken like true explorers. Just promise you won't let go of that sense of wonder. It's what keeps the stars shining." As they continued their journey, Darren and Zyra began to lay the foundations of a new life, one that was built on freedom, respect, and a love that had defied every challenge. They visited distant planets, learning about new cultures, lending their skills where they were needed, and creating a legacy together, one not defined by clan or tradition, but by choice and courage. One night, as they sat together on a distant planet under a sky filled with unfamiliar constellations, Zyra rested her head on Darren's shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "I never thought I'd find peace like this," she murmured. "I thought my life would always be a struggle, a fight for acceptance." Darren wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "You've earned every bit of it, Zyra, and whatever comes next, we'll face it together." They sat in comfortable silence, the stars above them a reminder of the vastness of their journey, of the countless paths they had yet to explore. For the first time, Darren felt truly at home, not bound to a place, but bound to a person, to a shared purpose that transcended any physical space. In that moment, he knew that their story was far from over. They had only just begun to carve out their own path, a life of adventure, love, and unwavering commitment. As they looked out at the stars, hand in hand, they knew that they had everything they needed, a love that had proven itself against all odds, and a future that was as boundless as the universe itself. The ship glided through open space, the stars a vast, glittering field stretching endlessly around them. Darren leaned back in his seat, watching Zyra as she adjusted the ship's controls, her movements as assured and graceful as ever. They had been traveling together for months now, and each day had only deepened the bond between them. Life aboard Jax's ship had proven both challenging and freeing, each destination a new adventure and a new test of their resilience. Together, they had explored planets with dense forests that glowed with bioluminescent plants, encountered species whose cultures left them in awe, and assisted colonies that needed their unique skills. Jax had become more than just a pilot. He was their friend, their bridge to the wider galaxy. He encouraged their curiosity and provided the wisdom of someone who had walked many paths. One evening, as they gathered in the small common room, Jax leaned back with a sly grin. "I think it's about time you two start considering a ship of your own." Darren looked at Zyra, feeling a thrill of excitement. The idea of having their own vessel, a place they could call home, a means to chart their own course, was a dream that had grown more tangible with each passing day. Zyra's eyes lit up. "A ship of our own, imagine the freedom." She glanced at Darren, her gaze filled with shared anticipation. "We could travel wherever we wanted, explore every corner of the galaxy." He nodded, already envisioning the possibilities. "And we wouldn't have to rely on anyone else. It would be just us." Jax chuckled, his expression warm. "You two deserve it. You've earned your place out here, and something tells me the galaxy has a lot more in store for you." They spent the next weeks planning, pooling their resources and discussing the kind of ship they wanted. One with sturdy armor, reliable engines, and enough space to accommodate their needs. It would be their sanctuary, a place where they could be fully themselves without the weight of societal expectations or judgment. Finally, the day arrived. Jax had helped them find a shipyard on a distant outpost, and after careful consideration, they selected a vessel, a sleek, versatile ship built for exploration and durability. As they walked through the corridors, inspecting the quarters, the engine room, and the cockpit, Darren felt a surge of pride. This was their ship, their home. Standing together in the cockpit, Zyra placed a hand on the console, her expression a mixture of pride and awe. "We did this, Darren. We created a life that's ours." He wrapped an arm around her, his voice filled with warmth. "And it's only the beginning." They bid farewell to Jax, thanking him for everything he had done. With promises to cross paths again, they set off on their own, the ship humming with new energy as they ventured into the vast unknown. Their journeys took them to planets they had only heard of in stories, places with towering cliffs, shimmering oceans, and ancient ruins that held the secrets of forgotten civilizations. They became known as a team, a pair who brought knowledge, aid, and a touch of mystery wherever they went. Darren's human adaptability and Zyra's Garathian strength made them a formidable duo, respected and valued by the beings they encountered. One evening, after a long day exploring the remnants of an ancient temple, they returned to their ship, exhausted but exhilarated. Zyra sank into one of the seats, her gaze thoughtful as she looked at Darren. "You know," she said softly, "when I left my clan, I thought I'd lost everything that defined me. But now, I feel like I found something even stronger, something that's entirely mine." He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. "And I feel like I found more than I ever thought possible. You gave me a home, Zyra, a purpose." They shared a quiet moment, the weight of their journey settling over them like a comforting cloak. They had both left pieces of their past behind, but they had created something new, something rooted in choice, respect, and a love that had grown through every trial and triumph. As they prepared to set off for their next destination, Zyra looked at him, a playful glint in her eyes. "Where to next, Captain?" Darren grinned, the thrill of possibility rushing through him. "Anywhere we want. The galaxy is ours." With a shared smile, they engaged the ship's engines, watching as the stars stretched before them in endless possibility. They had faced exile, judgment, and the loss of familiar ground, but together they had forged a path entirely their own, a path as boundless as the stars. And as they sailed through the darkness, hand in hand, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side, united by a love as vast and enduring as the universe.